And now I'd like to welcome here on TVP World Grigol Gegelia from the Lelo for Georgia party. Thank you very much for joining me today and sitting down to have this discussion. Now, we see these massive protests that have been taking place here throughout the week this week. Obviously, the foreign agents law is very divisive. We were just discussing how the younger generation is particularly influential in a way that you said you've never really seen before. So let's start there. How is the younger generation really making a difference in civil protest as the government is trying to pass this controversial bill?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's my pleasure to be with you. Well, I would start by saying that the people of Georgia have spoken again. And their voice is very loud, very audible. The spirit is fantastic. I think the people have shown that they will fight for a free Georgia, for a European Georgia, and they will at all costs, at all times, fight against evil Russian influence in Georgia. Because the people of Georgia, of all generations, know that Georgia has nothing in common with Russia. This evil, fascist, totalitarian empire, which has, at so many times in our history, really engulfed us, overtaken us, really attacked our religion, our national identity, our statehood. So we will never, ever allow that to happen again. And now, of all times, we all realize that this is the kind of seminal momentum when we have to act in order to deliver Georgia as far away from Russia as possible and as close to the EU and to the European family as possible. Because we know that we are Europeans. We know that we don't, even if we didn't aspire to join the European political family, we are Europeans because we've always been Europeans, and we are one sort of different version of what it means to be European, which of course in itself means different things to different corners of the EU, certainly. And we know that our quest for EU membership is, in a sense, a historic mission to get where we should have been a long, long time ago, if not for Russia and political chaos and the stagnation and crisis. So we're very determined to ensure that we reform this country, that we deliver, the adequate standards, and that we actually get the country to safety and prosperity, and we will do that. And I think the Generation Z, as they're called, has really transformed Georgia in some profound ways. For one thing, I think their protest is very different to anything that anybody remembers in this country in the 90s, in the 2000s. I think they've really created a new spirit of protest, new aesthetics of protest, and new zeal. And as we saw last year, nobody can really control them. Political parties can't, certainly, and of course the government cannot at all. They are free, independent, really patriotic, pro-Georgian and pro-EU people who have a very clear sense of what it means to lead a good life, of what justice, liberty, equality, and all the fundamental things mean, and they're actually ready to organize themselves independently of political parties, independently of sort of different actors and agents. They're actually ready to self-organize and defend those rights. And I think in that sense they've shown us something really new and very different and very much more alive and interesting, I must say. But also I think lately they've shown us the birth of a new civic nationalism in Georgia, which we haven't quite had yet in this country. Of course, Georgia is home to many nationalisms, pro-European, pro-Russian even, although a very small one, very conservative, very religious. There are different kinds of nationalisms in Georgia, but I think what the Generation Z has shown is that a completely new sense of what it means to be a Georgian in the contemporary world has been born right in front of our eyes. And I think these days will actually enter the pages of history books of Georgia as days when a very new kind of sense of Georgianness, if you like, a new kind of civic nationalism was actually born.
And what exactly is that?
I think it's a kind of...
What makes it different?
I think it's pragmatic. It's not emotional only. I think it's very rational, very pragmatic. It's very reform-oriented and rights-oriented. And it depends on civic categories of political thought. So it doesn't require any other kinds of, any reference to other kinds of, categories so much, unlike previous kinds of nationalism, which always relied on either some particular part of history or some particular kind of theological sort of dogma. These people are actually quite conservative, I must say. Like 85% of them, according to a survey some years ago, actually say that a politician should definitely believe in God. That's the kind of politician they like. So they are conservative, but they are not necessarily guided by any other principle apart from political concepts and political principles like equality, like justice, like democracy. So these are kind of the Android generation, if you like, a very free, very open generation who's very skeptical about many things, including about us, which I love about them. So they don't actually buy slogans quite so easily. They want to hear the rationalization behind political ideas. They are very clever people, and they're very independent people, and they don't really, nobody can really run them. And I think that's lovely, because that kind of time has to stop in Georgia when people are run by others. We need citizens who run themselves, and then in so doing run the country as well.
Obviously, with this new generation, they're very adept to social media and the newest technologies. Have you noticed any kind of major leap forward in that regard concerning these protests and the political culture that we're seeing surrounding these young people?
I think this new era has worked as well, certainly. The fact that these people are very social media savvy, very articulate in all the contemporary technologies, all the contemporary applications, of course that's also working. Because, of course, the government, the Georgian Dream government, is trying to use propaganda at all levels against its own people. They are very much engaged in this Russian hybrid warfare against the Georgian nation. And of course, unfortunately, propaganda works on certain groups of people, but it certainly doesn't work on the Gen Z, because they are very independent. They have Instagram, they all use Facebook and Instagram and other social media. They share information very fast. They think differently because of their access to these applications. So yes, I think this social media background and the context which the social media has created is really very powerful as one of these sort of tools behind why Generation Z has changed so much in the protests. But this generation aside, I think generally the protest is stronger and more interesting because we have those tools like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram. I think these tools actually work to the benefit of Georgian democracy. And I think protests have grown much more interesting and sort of vivid and colorful because of that. So yes, I think...
Well, in the last one, I mean, if we look back to last year, the last protest was highly successful.
Yeah.
Right? One could say, I've said this before, that if you want to look for the rule of law in Georgia, well, look for it in the streets.
Yeah.
Because when we get to a moment where it's make or break, then usually the streets get filled up with people. At least that's what it seems to for an outsider. So where do you see this current situation heading? The government said that they weren't going to reintroduce such a bill. They're doubling down now. There are a lot of theories about the timing and what have you. But where do you think we're headed?
For one thing, I certainly agree. I think the people of Georgia have shown that each time when our Georgian national identity and our foreign policy and security policy are threatened, we speak out. And we speak out very clearly and very audibly. I think one other, if we look at last year, there were several attempts from sort of KGB to really outmaneuver us. They got Lavrov's daughter to marry in Georgia, of all possible places in the world. They got, earlier, they got Gavrilov, and of course what ensued is what the world has heard, the Gavrilov night, when people lost their eyes, but we protested, and we got rid of Gavrilov. Then there was Pozner, Putin's crony and one of the allies from the intellectual and artistic circles, and we really ousted him from the country. And I was there at night, really in front of his hotel, making sure that he would leave the country urgently. So each time with Gavrilov, with Pozner, with Lavrova, we show that we do not want to have Putinist Russians in this country and influential, actors of Putin's political circle in this country. There's no place for them in Georgia, and we'll make sure that there will never be a place for them in Georgia. And I think Russia is testing the waters ever and ever again, because that's the kind of tactics they have everywhere. Last year, Russia tried to what degree it could actually get with Georgians, and it failed miserably, I must say. Now this year, they've tried again using the Georgian Dream, which is a pro-Russian government, decidedly. So I think the reintroduction of this bill was really another kind of attempt at Russifying Georgia, and it's going to fail. And no matter how this particular bill goes, the government will fail and fall. And they've got it guaranteed, because nothing Russian can thrive in Georgia. And again, we'll make sure that that continues the way it happened last year, when over 150,000 Georgians actually told the government from this square, do not pass the law. So returning this law, I think, is pretty suicidal.
Upcoming elections, I guess we got about 6 months or so next fall, the upcoming elections. What are the possibilities?
Well, these are going to be very tough elections, because a lot is at stake. And I think most Georgians have a very clear sense, that what's going on now is far from just one ordinary elections. Because now we're actually casting our votes in a referendum about the fundamental identity of Georgia, about where this country will be in 5 years, in 10 years. To what extent will we actually have a chance of joining the European political family, which history has, for unfortunate reasons, but still opened up for Georgia and for Ukraine and Moldova, certainly. And that's an opportunity that we really must use, because we understand that we might not have such an opportunity for a long time. So it's something that we cannot miss. It's unfortunate we have a government of all times at such time like this, that we have a government which is pro-Russian. But we can act to get rid of this government, to reform the country. In a year's time, we can actually deliver all the key reforms, and we can actually try to get Georgia ever closer to the European Union. So I think that this will be really fundamental elections when we decide our EU fate and our national identity. So I think this will be very tightly contested elections. The government will unfortunately resort to all kinds of extremes in order to stay in power, which to them, of course, means making a lot of corrupt money, and they're all multimillionaires in so doing, I must say. But we have truth, the people, our partners, and history on our side. So I'm very confident that this battle will actually result in a prosperous European Georgia.
All right. Well, Grigol Gegelia, thank you very much for sitting down to talk with me today. I appreciate it.